Hello guys and welcome back to this channel. Today we're doing a really exciting sewing project. It's this one right here, Vogue v9076. And this is the one I'll be sewing. It's a slightly shorter model than this one, and it has this tie tied up at the neck. So that's the one that I'll be sewing. And I'll be using two different silk fabrics for this project. For the yoke and the midriff sections, I'll be using this stone-washed silk, which is a bit more stable. And for the skirt, the sleeves, and the panels in the bodice, I'll be using this slightly more lightweight silk. It's almost like a chiffon, but it's not see-through. Now, before we get into this video, I just wanted to tell you guys that this part is in collaboration with an online course provider in Norwegian. It's called Unique som deg, and I've used this page before entering into this collaboration with them. I made my first bra a few weeks ago. I was under the illusion that this would be an easy project, just copy a bra I already had. How hard could it be? When you just see it like this, it looks okay. So I was quite happy with this and I spent a lot of time on it. This has no function. This online course provider, they tell you everything you need to know, from adapting the pattern to your own body, following the pattern. They use the pin-up girl pattern that I used myself to make this bra, which actually fits. And here you can see you can also become a member. Then you get full access to all the courses and you get a lot of help while you're working on it. You also get access to a lot of special offers and so on. Below I also have a link to a course about sewing a padded bra. That is something I'm going to be doing on this channel shortly. And the provider of these courses is also super helpful. If you're stuck while you're working, you can send pictures and ask for tips and so on, which really helps. Underneath this video in the description, I have links that you guys can use to find and purchase courses, and you can also become a member on this site. If you use these links, you also support this channel, which helps me keep doing what I love and giving you guys new content. So this is the mock-up so far. I'm just going to show you guys what it looks like. This is just part of the bodice. It looks quite baggy on camera now, but it fits quite nicely. I might take it in like a centimeter and a half around the waist, and it will drape differently over the bust because that will be a different fabric. This is quite stiff cotton fabric, so it doesn't really drape. This was supposed to be like an in-between project, but I'm kind of enthusiastic now. I start off by cutting the yoke and the midriff section out of this blue stone-washed silk. I try to pattern match these pieces because there is a pattern to this fabric, even though it's not very obvious. So this is the front of the midriff section and the back. I interfaced this off camera, and here I'm just pinning these together before sewing them. also pin the yoke pieces together and sew them as well. And here I'm just pressing the seams open to make them nice and flat. So here's the midriff, and that will be attached to the yoke parts. And then I'm just cutting the seam allowance to make this corner between these pieces a bit easier to work around. And this is a front flap that will be underneath the buttons that I just sewed together and then attached to the front panel. And here I'm cutting the rouleau straps that will be used to make up this tying in the neck and also for the button loops. These were the first rouleau straps that I made, and I was quite nervous about it, but it ended up working out quite okay. And that is much thanks to this basting glue that I find quite useful for these slippery fabrics. And this was a trick I saw on YouTube somewhere. I'm not entirely sure where, just using a needle and thread to turn out the rouleau straps. And these I attached to this front panel before putting on the lining. That way they are encased in between those two layers. And here I'm just attaching the lining to the yoke and midriff panels. And here are the yoke and midriff sections before attaching the collar. And here are the collar pieces that are sewn together and then attached to the neckline. I'm just trimming the seam allowance here, especially around the rounded parts, to make it nice and even. And here I'm just attaching this collar to the neckline before turning it over and slip stitching it on the inside. And I basted this first just to make it a bit easier to sew. I was a bit tired at this point, so I ended up doing the slip stitch while lying down and watching a Netflix series. So moving on to the panels of the bodice, I'm first cutting these and then I'm sewing a gathering stitch at the top and the bottom before attaching them to the yoke and the midriff. First, I'm overlocking the edges to just make sure there is no fraying. And here I am sewing the side seams together, as you can see here. They have been pressed and the back and front panels are ready to be attached to the yoke and midriff. I'm first just cutting these corners to make it possible to attach these panels onto the bodice. And this was quite a hassle. I found this quite difficult to do, just getting the corners right. One of the more difficult patterns I've sewn personally. So here I'm just attaching the panel. You can see here when trying on the finished bodice that it fits quite nicely. And here I'm moving on to the cuffs. So I'm just cutting the cuffs and then I'm starting with the sleeve section of the bodice. Here I've sewn the gathering seam at the top. I'm just pinning before sewing the underarm seam. And at the bottom of this sleeve, there is a narrow hem around this opening where the cuffs are later attached. And I'm just pressing this before sewing it off camera. And here you can see the top stitch around this narrow hem. And the cuffs have been interfaced here, and I'm just trimming away some of the seam allowance before sewing the sides and attaching it to the bottom part of the sleeve. I'm gathering up the fullness of the bottom part of the sleeve before pinning it to the cuff. And there you go. And I overlocked this seam, which was a mistake because I ended up getting some of the sleeve fabric stuck in the overlock. So there is a sort of like hang up in the seam, but it's not very visible, thankfully. And then I'm attaching the sleeve to the bodice, the armhole, and this was also a bit tricky. I had to gather it up and ease it in. So I ended up using quite a bit of basting glue here as well to just make sure everything was secure before sewing it. Fitting sleeves into armholes is generally the part about sewing clothes that I like the least, just because it's always a bit tricky, I feel. And here you can see the finished bodice. Everything is in place and is ready to start working on the skirt. So here you can see the front of the skirt. There is this opening in the front that I'm working on first. It has this narrow hem here as well, just like on the sleeve. You can see it on the animation where that is. So that is first just sewn into place. And then the two front pieces are just pinned together like this, and I'm just sewing the front seam. And there is the front finished. Then I've just sewn a gathering seam afterwards, and then the skirt is sewn together in the sides and attached to the bodice. And here I'm sewing the skirt onto the bodice, just making sure that the gathering is even throughout this whole seam. I overlocked this part as well, and thankfully there was no incidents with this part. And then I'm just pressing the hem at the bottom of the skirt. Because I've overlocked the seam, I found it a lot easier to press and make this hem nice and narrow. that's it. Then I'm just attaching the buttons at the front. I ended up doing press-on buttons for the sleeves just because I find it a bit more practical. I had to be a bit careful with one side because they have this decoration. And that is the dress finished. So if you guys like this video, please leave a like and please subscribe if you want to see more. I would also appreciate comments about future projects that you guys would suggest, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.